Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Oh yeah, hey, let's do a radio show. Hey, good morning everybody, how you doing? It is Tuesday, February 4th, 2020. Happy birthday to my youngest of all of my brothers. We'll hide his identity for the moment because of course it'll be an embarrassing day for everybody, I think, at some level or another. And but we'll just wish you happy birthday. If you're still listening, that is. Occasionally family members do listen to the show. Good morning everyone. It is Groundhog Day / 2 days after Groundhog Day / the day on which we all admit that the Iowa caucuses are a ridiculous failure and that there's no use in keeping them at all, except that's every day on the show, and so no different there than anything else. But I guess the more spectacular fails, the most spectacular fail, I guess, that we've had for quite a while in the caucuses, although they're all failures, really, quite honestly. Can't imagine anything. I can't think of anything worse at the moment, but, it's chaos. Maybe someone will remind me of a worse moment for us. But anyway, let's get going here. It's time to do the radio show live. Daily Coast Radio, as I have just told you, is live now. But now Bill is telling you from Portland, Maine, where they did not have a caucus yesterday, though they might have one today. People will be adopting these things all around the country, I'm sure. Bill says, I think as we prayerfully await the final results in Iowa, you're never going to get them, we take note, you should take note of the gentle, loving words of me, Kagro X, David Waldman. It's not caulk me, it's caulk us. And that's true. This has happened to all of us. And it's actually true. It reflects poorly on everybody because I can't tell you, I don't know. How do I sum this up? I don't know if I can. And we might be able to get somebody on the air who can give us something of an insider's view of the caucus system in general. I think maybe Joan has had some caucusing experience in the past as well, too. I'm not 100% sure. I think I can't recall. I try to block it out of my mind. Anytime anybody has ever told me they've participated in a caucus, I try to forget that about them. However, we'll see what we can do, but I don't know. Maybe it's just best to sit outside and throw rocks at them at this point. I mean, really, what's trying to understand it? That's for idiots, as far as I'm concerned. How bad did it go? I mean, I think you're getting a picture of it right now, right? Nobody knows who won. That's where we stand right now, as far as I know. Honestly, in the few minutes I had to review the news this morning, I could discern nothing, except that apparently they decided in this extraordinarily convoluted system that they have to use some sort of software system to do, I guess probably to help the precinct captains do their math and then report their results. And there's varying reports about whether or not the software system or possibly an app that came along with the software system crashed and made it difficult for precinct captains to do their calculations and or report their results. And that just played right into the Trump campaign is, gleefully tweeting, see, this is a disaster just like everything that Democrats do. And Brad Parscale is trolling and Donald Trump is trolling and looking to do their best to foment discontent and conspiracy theories about plots to hurt various candidates by making these problems crop up purposefully. It's crazy. First thing I saw last night that is actually perfectly routine, but tells us a little something about the way these things work, was, did I pocket this one or not? Probably not, because it was pretty routine at the time, and it was video out of one of the precincts wherein the precinct captain is announcing to everybody over a microphone and loudspeaker that there is a tie among in the delegate count among two candidates. And I don't even remember which ones they were. I think it was actually Buttigieg and Warren. And they were left with, I guess, no alternative. I guess the rules tell you, what do you do when you've got a tie? Like, it's not a tie vote between the two candidates in terms of the number of people supporting them, but a tie in terms of what? I don't know. I guess they had a delegate to split or to allocate, and they were both equally entitled to that delegate. I don't remember exactly what was going on. They had to do a coin toss to figure out who was going to get this extra delegate. And here it is. And I guess we could even put the audio of the thing up. Let's see. Am I on the right page here? Yeah. Why don't I pocket it so then I can put it up on the the big show computer, and we'll play the audio. And it's not overwhelming or anything. But what really struck me was everybody understood that they would have to do this. Maybe not everybody knew it ahead of time that they would have to do this. But I'm just listening to the moans and groans of the people coming to the realization that this would be determined by coin toss. After hours of standing around and doing this intricate caucus dance that they do, this was all going. Well, the winner, I guess, the candidate that came over with one more delegate at this precinct, delegate to the county caucuses, I guess, than the other, but getting to walk away with bragging rights at being the winner, comes down to a coin toss, and there's moaning and groaning, and it's just like, wow, look how attached to their beautiful, archaic caucus system the people of Iowa are. They can't stand it either. I mean, it's like 30 seconds of film here. Let's see. Here we go.
So we're going to flip a coin.
We're going to flip a coin. And
Warren and Buttigieg are tied, and in order to break that tie, we have to flip a coin.
You hear how much they love it?
38. So this is for a second delegate.
Okay, so there you go. It's not like super exciting audio, but it's kind of revealing watching, and you can see the faces of some of the people, the face of the precinct captain, and you see he's tired. He's been there for how long? He's irritated that he has to announce this. He knows that there's going to be moaning and groaning. He knows that people don't like it. So I think there was a question, and then the answer in the exchange there, somebody shouts out from the corner, what number are they tied at? And he says 38. So I guess they're talking about, I don't know. And maybe they weren't tied for the lead. I don't know. But they had 38 people in each of their groups. It looks like from the notes up on the whiteboard behind the guy that viability is 24. So both of them were viable, obviously. And then, of course, the big reveal at the end is after the moaning and groaning and the coin toss and the discontent and the hours and hours of being there, the coin toss was to determine who gets the extra delegate. They each had one delegate, and now one of them was going to have two delegates to that county's county caucus. And that's what all the, luckily it didn't break out into a fight. But it just goes to show, even there, where they're supposedly used to the system, and I guess maybe attached to it, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they all hate it. This stuff must come up all the time. And I think from Travis's experiences with the Colorado caucuses, we got a feel for this. The idea, I guess in Colorado they were doing it this way, and you go. The problems with aside from all the anti-democratic problems with the caucus, participation problems. I saw lots of tweets from people doing door knocking yesterday, expressing their dismay and disappointment at the number of people who said, I'd love to cast my vote, but I am home tonight, I am disabled, or I have kids to take care of, or I'm exhausted, or I haven't gotten home from work yet, so I can't answer the door. But people were actually able to talk to the canvassers, saying, yeah, you're out here, maybe some of you have driven in from other states to organize for your candidate, and you have all this energy for your candidate, but I can't do it. I can't be bothered, basically, to not to spend 5 hours on this thing anyway. But so aside from all of those problems, to then sort of top it off with the ridiculousness of not knowing who won or anything like that. Just makes things worse. But there's also the problem that the caucus system, although really this part doesn't have anything necessarily to do with caucuses, because there are certainly states in which we hold primaries or something like it that sometimes layer this stupid system on top of it that bakes into the system, or puts back into the system in some cases, all of the stupid mathematics that distort the results, not unlike gerrymandering or even the Electoral College. We just bake this stuff into the system. But I guess the caucus system is particularly susceptible to it, because you don't just take a look at, who won and what number did they get, and you don't apportion delegates like, I don't know, in any way that looks like it's proportional to the votes. There's a formula, and it makes a certain amount of sense. But when you're talking about only a couple of delegates per precinct, you end up with warped math. Maybe the best thing to do here to explain this point, or to lay the foundation for this point, is I'll take a look at a tweet thread that I caught on to this morning that I thought was, it was great that it was there. So I always love this perspective on things. Plus, it helps explain things, and explainers are good. I'm not Vox, but I'm saying. Now, this comes from Sean Sebastian, who is a checkmark type of fellow on Twitter, as it turns out. And I believe it looks to be the case that he is a supporter of Sanders. But in this case, he is speaking to us as precinct captain, or caucus secretary is the title he gives for it. I am the caucus secretary for Story County Precinct 1-1. And he begins his story by saying, I've been on hold for over an hour to report the results. He's calling in the results, and maybe he may be calling in the results because the app wasn't working. And there's a whole story about the app thing too. And there was a whole kinds of rumors about, this app sucks. Who did it? Who developed it? There were rumors floating that Robbie Mook, who is a Hillary Clinton person, owns the company or is a partner in the company that developed the app. And I guess if you're conspiracy-minded supporter of someone, of a candidate whose supporters are inclined to be, let's say, discontented with Hillary Clinton on some regular basis, you might think, he's manipulating the results through the app that he controls, and that's his. And apparently, he's disclaiming any connection whatsoever to it. We don't develop apps. I don't have a company that does that. So all kinds of stories circulating. I don't know which part of it is true and which part is not, and I'm not even certain I care. I'm just sort of illustrating the field on which we're playing at this point. So Sean Sebastian tweets that he's at this county, Story County Precinct 1-1, phoning in his results to God knows where, state party, central, organizational, and I believe they used the term boiler room at some point, and that got everybody suspicious too. So here's the deal. They don't have that many people at the precinct. They just do this. You'd think this was easy, right? And it's designed supposedly to be easy, but in fact it's not. And in addition to being not easy, it's actually stupid. So here's the deal. Remember, we're going to have 3 sets of data, and we all figured, oh my God, that's going to create some kind of confusion. But I like the concept of having all this data. It's very transparent, except that it just, it causes all sorts of problems, I'm sure. Anyway, here's what happened. They all get there. They mill about. They say, go to your corners, whatever. He says, first alignment, here's what we got. 111 people standing in the corner for Bernie Sanders. 82 people standing in another corner for Elizabeth Warren. 47 people standing in another corner for Pete Buttigieg. And by the way, I think Pete Buttigieg is running around saying, I won, shocking the world. So I don't know, I don't know how to evaluate that claim. It may be true. That's what's happening here. 111 for Sanders, 82 for Warren, 47 for Pete Buttigieg. So at this point, that's something. Now he reports his delegate count, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off on that because I think that's almost a spoiler. But, the point is, in his reporting of it, this is relatively transparent. This is the first alignment, and then this is the end result. But I'm going to hold it for the minute. But it wasn't Sean. He's not hiding the ball. He's telling you what he had. But he didn't tell you up front what the second alignment was. So he's not 100% transparent. Arrest that guy. It comes in the next tweet. All right. So let's see. The next part up here says we had 285 people total in our caucus. Okay. I can handle that. 15% viability threshold, which I guess is the same everywhere. That means you need at least 43 people to be able to be viable after the first round. Okay, that makes a certain amount of sense, right? What is? Let's just pull out the calculator here because I have an app. Why just take that answer? 43 out of 285, obviously is 15%, but by how much? I guess what's the actual number? It's just over. So you get to just over 15. You can't be 14.9. I guess is the rule. So that brings you to 15.087719%. 43 people. Simple enough. I mean, except for all the numbers I had to read out loud, but that's basic math. So Sean continues and says, people were already gathered in their assigned areas, so good, all right. And it was pretty clear who was viable and who wasn't. You need to have 43 people. Yeah, and for most cases, like for Pete Buttigieg, you have 47 people there, you probably had to go, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, counting. You know how that goes. And so that he would have to do. Otherwise, you see 111 people here. That's obviously over 43. You see one person someplace. That's clearly not 43. 10 people someplace. Clearly not 43. Okay, so it's pretty clear who was viable and who wasn't. Biden had fewer than 30 people. That is very interesting. And Pete had right around the 45 or so. Even before we got a count on the first alignment, the Biden people bailed and went to Pete or Amy. And that's where I think having all the results is helpful if you can get them correctly. And I don't know, I guess I never really thought about whether or not the results were really going to be verifiable. But presuming that there are enough people around watching over the reporting of the results that you're not going to be motivated. And what's the motivation really, ultimately? It's a long, long walk for the benefits of cheating in telling people that instead of having 38 people after the first realignment and then going down to 12 and then disappearing entirely, that's how Yang had it for the night. That's not what he's actually reporting. But as an example, Yang is always I figure there's very few Yang supporters listening. And so I pick on them strategically because there'll be the least number of complaints. But I might be wrong about that. Oh, I could have done Delaney that way. How about that? Anyway, for all the transparency, I don't know how much motivation there is to screw with those numbers, but how do we know they're right? I don't know. How do we know anything is right? Okay, so there we are. Before they even had a count on the first alignment, though, Biden, I guess they have 30 people. They clearly, we're not going to make it. And so they just, before they even get instructions, they say, all right, everybody, screw it. You came here for Biden. It's not worth it. Find a new place. Most people, it's guessed, I suppose, went to Pete or Amy. When we got to the first alignment, so this happened before the first alignment. When they got to the first alignment, everybody freeze. We're going to count you. Among the viable candidates are Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg. Sanders has 111, a number we've heard before. Warren has 68, and Buttigieg has 47. Among the unviable candidates, there's Klobuchar with 36, Yang with 17, Steyer with 4, Biden with 2, that hurts for Biden supporters, undecided 1. But remember, the Biden people split up before the first alignment and bailed at like fewer than 30. So at one point, the number was closer to 30. It ends up being 2, which means before the first alignment, the Biden people say, we got to get out of here. This is dumb. We're not going to make it. Let's find a second choice. 2 people said, to hell with that. I'm Biden all the way. which, okay, that's what you get to do. Then they say, all right, first alignment is over. Klobuchar people, Yang people, Steyer people, Biden people, undecided people, either go to another group, or if you think you can make it to viability before the second alignment in however long they give you, go for it. So Klobuchar, like they might say, well, we might be able to get 10 people or 9 people to join and make it to 45, or they give up. Yang, Steyer, Biden, undecided probably say, forget it and move on. So, okay, and of the 36 standing there for Klobuchar, some number of them were people who went, who left Biden before the first alignment. Anyway, Sean reports, I hand counted the viables and just took reports from the unviables. So this adds up to 1 extra, which means, of course, that somebody got it wrong somewhere, but I guess it doesn't matter since they're going to be non-viable. You figure, all right, well, why disrupt things and demand that people totally honestly go back to your corner so I can get an accurate result for one person who was miscounted somewhere, to report results that don't count for anything but would be part of our transparency effort to show what happened, which immediately tells you the problem with the let's show all the transparency so that there's no questions about what happened. You already have a math error, and so that's just this one precinct, and there's nothing wrong with it. Sean didn't do anything wrong here. I guess he could have said, well, I want you to hand count everybody, viable and unviable, but you can count wrong too. But once you have a math error, you got room for conspiracy theory, etc. So, and that can happen, again, in a primary too. We're not that great at counting regular votes either. So anyway, so that's what he's got. It shows the whiteboard or a poster board where he's written everything up. Sanders, at one point has 110 written down. They scratched that out and write 111. Not certain exactly what that is all about, but I don't know. But then they put stars by the names of the people who are viable after first alignment. Sanders, Buttigieg, Warren. Right? We got those numbers. They were 111 for Sanders, Warren 68, Buttigieg 47. On the second alignment, we got our totals. So now these are the totals that they're also going to report. This is where it really matters. Second alignment, there's no more screwing around. If you're not viable, I don't know what, leave or join another group, but you can't just stand there. So Sean tweets, on the second alignment, we got our totals. Sanders plus 5. So in the second alignment, 5 more people join him. They got 116 there now. Warren gains 14 and goes to 82. Buttigieg gains 26 and goes to 73. Non-aligned, they're still counting the non-aligned, get 11 people. Now, that's 116, 82, 73, and 11. And I don't know what that total's up to, but Sean right away says, well, we lost a couple of people who just had to leave at this point. And it's not clear whether that's because they refused to line up with one of the viable groups, or whether they had been there for 3 hours and they couldn't stay for a fourth. But imagine that, right? You go through all this trouble and you go through the alignments and this and that, and in the end, you still don't really get counted because you're just like, I can't take it anymore. My house is burning down. I got to walk the dog. The kids need dinner, whatever. So there you have it. Second alignment, Sanders 116, Warren 82, Buttigieg 73, non-aligned 11. So he tweets next, the formula to apportion delegates is you take the total numbers after the second alignment. So 116 for Sanders, times the total number of delegates that you have to allocate at your precinct, divided by the total number of people at the caucus, which we found out before was 285. Now the big reveal. All of this is to name 6 delegates to the next level, whether that's the county caucus or the statewide caucus. That part is not clear. Nobody bothers to tell me any of that. That's okay. 6 whole delegates you're doing all this math for. Okay, well, 285 people, not that difficult to deal with, right? So that's your formula. 116 for Sanders, times times the total number of delegates, that's 6, divided by the total number of people at the caucus. So, you do the math. 116 times 6 divided by 285. Sanders' number is 2.44. Okay, I'm getting it. Warren, it's at 82 times 6 divided by 285 equals 1.72. Buttigieg, what was his number? Buttigieg was 73 times 6 divided by 285 equals 1.53. Sanders, 2.44. Warren, 1.72. Buttigieg, 1.53. Well, okay, Mr. 0.44 of a person, you go over to Sanders, whereas Ms. 0.72 of a person go over to Warren, etc., etc. You see how this goes? You got to round it out. Fractions of people can't go anywhere. Although, honestly, why don't you just report fractions of people and then add it up among precincts, and anytime you get over a 1, you add a delegate, and if you don't make it over 1, you don't get the delegate. It doesn't matter what your rounding method is. Rounding is rounding, and it doesn't help in terms of proportionality and accuracy. So, okay, the upshot of this is what? Well, 2.44 has to get rounded. How do you round? Well, I guess you round to the nearest integer. And what's the nearest integer to 2.44? Oh, we're late on our music. Crap. All right, well, that means for an awkward exit. But 2.44 rounds down to 2. 1.72 for Warren rounds to the next nearest integer. 1.72 rounds up to 2. Buttigieg, 1.53, just squeaking over the top to 2. That's 2 to 2 to 2. Does that sound right? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. This makes for an awkward re-entry, too, with all sorts of extra music time because of my lateness with the music, but I think the breaks are what they are. All right, so as we exited, I gave you a sense of what the problem was going to be. I actually announced what the problem was. 2 to 2 to 2 was the delegate count. Remember, Sanders has 116 people standing in his corner. And the next nearest is Warren with 82, and then Buttigieg with 73. So maybe we take the most extreme example here and say, well, let's see, 73 versus 116 is what? Well, let's see. I guess we could just do the basic math. 116 minus 73 means that there were 43, almost a whole viability measure, which was 45. 43 more people are standing for Sanders than for Buttigieg. 43 out of, well, what's the percentage? How do we figure that out? 43 is the difference. I guess out of, what is it, 116? Do we divide by 116 to get there are 37, is that right? 37% more people for Sanders than there are for Buttigieg, I guess, right? So anyway, I mean, a significant number of, there's a significant margin between Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg. But the formula is what it is, and you only have 6 people, and you can't divide them in half. So, despite having 43 more people than Buttigieg and some other number, what is that? Looks like the difference between Buttigieg and Warren was 9, so 43. 34 more people than Warren. You all get the same delegates. It's a tie, everybody. 2 to 2 to 2. Did they tie in that precinct? No. Bernie Sanders clobbered everybody in that precinct. But what really matters here isn't the number of people. It's the number of delegates, after all. Bottom line, right? How many delegates are you sending? Whether to the national convention or the county or the state or whatever the hell you're doing. Nope. It's a tie. Did Sanders win Story County 1-1? Well, by one measure, yes. And by another measure, no. So already, as Bernie Sanders would say, if it were up to him, I don't know that he would hang this label on it, but if you were, I don't know, if you lost or you came away saying, I clobbered if this happened in every precinct and you were tied with everybody, Bernie would say, it's a disaster, and everybody would be inclined to agree. So, Sean continues here, or we left off with his reading of the formula, which was very helpful to know, and you get to see the math, and because otherwise, that first tweet I told you about, I left off the delegate count. Remember, he had just said first alignment, Bernie Sanders 111, Elizabeth Warren 82, Pete Buttigieg 47. Then I left off this part. Delegates, Sanders 2, Warren 2, Buttigieg 2. They go through a first, second alignment. People move. Warren gets more people, presumably. And no, not really. Although it says after first alignment, Warren had 82. This is an interesting thing, too. Second alignment, Warren had 68. She lost people somehow. By the final, whatever the hell happened, by the second alignment, she's back up to 82. And Sanders has gained even more. It's 116. Buttigieg goes crazy, 73. Everybody gets 2 delegates. So there you have that. And he shows the whiteboards. And everybody has to stand there and look at that. And you got to agree that 1.53 rounds up to 2. As silly as that is. But I guess had he had one, now that's where somebody makes a difference, right? If he had 72, does he clear it with 72? Let's just do the math on that. So what was it? 72 times 6 divided by 285 equals 1.51. So he still would have gotten 2 delegates. What about 71? And this is dumb, but divided by 285. So at 71 delegates, things would have shifted. Or 71 people, things would have left him at 1.49. He would have been rounded down to 1 delegate. So he clears the bar to tie it up by 2 actual people out of the 285 that they had. I don't know whether that's originally or who. I guess so. And then people who left don't count, but that's how close to the market was. So Sean Sebastian, our reporter in this case, goes on to say, these are the results that I've been trying to report for about 2 hours now. Now, after you do all this math, you got to report the thing. And I don't know whether, it doesn't say whether he tried to use the app and it didn't work. We don't get into all of that in his story. He's calling wherever to try to report. He's on hold for 2 hours. He says, I was on hold for about 90 minutes, and this is a great story. CNN wanted to interview him about his experience. What a great idea, right? Why not? Have some fun. Get yourself interviewed. Well, he's on hold, and he says, I've been on hold 90 minutes. Why not? We'll do the interview. How long can the interview go? During the interview, he gets off hold, but he couldn't pick up his phone fast enough, getting away from the interview, and they hang up on him, and he has to start all over again, which just goes to show you, don't do any interviews. You want to be transparent about things and explain to people how it's going and give people a thrill around the country, what it's like to be inside the Iowa caucuses. But you had a job to do. You got to stay on the line. The hunger for the interview is just going to have to wait. But I mean, maybe it wasn't a bad decision. And in the end, so you stay on hold and you wait longer. So maybe, I guess it depends where you value your time. If you think it's more important to explain to people around the country how this is going and you're willing to stay on hold with the state party or whatever until 2 in the morning, then by all means do it. If you want to go home early, then decline the interview and stay on the line. Anyway, he's back on hold. And for those of you in my mentions, he says, clearly I think this is really messed up too. I don't think this is a way to do democracy. I was just following the rules. Don't say it that way. And this is the outcome the rules got us. If I can ever get the results reported, that is, still on hold. Update, by the way, he says later on, I got connected a little after 11 p.m. and reported my results. With all the complicated things to report, the total, the first alignment, caveats about the math and the totals, etc., it took almost 20 minutes to report. Starting to understand why I was on hold for so long. That's interesting too. I wonder if that was part of the interview. I can't believe it. I'm on hold forever. This is the worst system. It sucks. Just pick up the phone and take my results. Well, now you know. Having now been through the experience, well, it takes 20 minutes to report. That's going to leave you on hold for a while. Well, he's understanding about it now. I don't know how the interview went. Maybe he was perfectly patient then too. Or maybe that didn't come up. Let's see. He says, here's another thread with some more context on the caucus. Even though the delays in reporting are getting the most coverage, the biggest problems with the Iowa caucuses were baked in before we got in the room last night. And we can find out what some of those are. It's a whole other thread that Sean sends. He says, well, let's take a look. How long does this run? A little bit. Not too bad. Maybe we'll read through it. Just want to clarify something, he says. And when was this done? This was this morning. These results are accurate, and I believe when we get the results to the Iowa caucuses, they will be accurate. Every person in the room saw every stage, agreed to the accuracy of every count, and there's a paper trail for every person's choices. That's good. But of course, there are still conspiratorial-minded people who say, well, sure, it went according to the rules, but the rules were rigged. And, I guess you could have that fight too. All right, so let's see. In this explanation thread, he points back to the old thread explaining how things happened. But in this new thread, he says, the technical difficulties reporting the results of the Iowa caucus has just caused a delay, but eventually we will find out the results. The real problem with the Iowa caucuses started before we got into the room, and here are the problems. Iowa is 90% white as a state. There is that. We've mentioned that before. The Iowa caucus is unrepresentative. The Democratic Party is over 50% people of color, but to even think about running for president, you need to make a case that you can do well in Iowa, which is 90% white, and then in New Hampshire, which is even whiter. Okay, we've agreed with that. The Iowa caucus is undemocratic. He adds by saying, despite gestures at attempts at reform, the caucus fundamentally disenfranchises parents who need to take care of their kids, people who have to work at night, the elderly, the disabled. It's why turnout was about 16%. And the Iowa caucus is needly complicated to administer. New Hampshire has the first primary, so to be first, Iowa has to be a caucus with all the counts, the delegate math, etc. There is no democratic value to a caucus over a primary. It's just done to maintain first in the nation status. That is true. Because of the complications related to the Iowa caucus, reforms had to be instituted, so we now have the raw vote totals before alignment, after people move, and the final delegate count. Complications with administration were entirely predictable, and here he includes an article from Medium that, I don't know who wrote it, it doesn't say right up front here in the connection, but it does say the Iowa caucuses are going to be a effing nightmare. I would say an effing nightmare, but it's not really the word effing, and they use the full word there, so you can say a effing nightmare instead. So Sean continues on and wraps up here. So yes, the app, the wait times on the hotline, and the delay in results are all bad, but eventually we will get accurate results. The biggest problems with the Iowa caucus are structural, predictable, and baked in before any of us even got into the room last night. And if you'd like to read more about it, I don't know, do you care? I think people who have done the best reporting on the problems with the caucus, how it's unrepresentative, disenfranchising, difficult to administer are, and he refers you to a couple of Twitter accounts here, Liz Lenz and Elaine Godfrey. So you'll get that in the roundup tonight if you feel like reading their follow-ups on that. And maybe we should. They've been warning us, he says, and then closes things out at 8 tweets on this second thread. I think in the first thread, there's a response here that I guess it looks like, and I think I pocketed this thing. I guess there's some live coverage from CNN's, or I guess it's tape now, but it was live coverage last night from CNN's coverage of the Iowa caucuses, in which they are doing this interview with Sean Sebastian. And Brett Banditelli, who many of you know and follow on Twitter, was laughing about it. CNN put Sean Sebastian live on the air after being on hold for an hour and a half with Iowa Dems. The party finally put them through, and then they hung up on him while he was talking to Wolf Blitzer, I guess, live. And so there's a 1 minute, 17-second clip that I don't even know if it actually shows it, but it's part of the interview. You can hear it and everything. But I don't think there's any indication necessarily in the interview, in the audio of the interview, that would indicate to us clearly that people are being hung up on. But that would be pretty hilarious if you could hear the click noise and all that. So there you have it. That's the report from someone on the ground. That's all I can tell you. And that's all, it's a good source too. Now, there's other information that would help round out the picture of things. And I'll give it to you, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to return to the fact that this was very, very, very stupid. And that the math sucks. And even if it goes beautifully and is done in 15 minutes, honestly, the math that tells you 116 to 82 to 73 is a tie is dumb math anyway. But like I said, in other systems, even in where they're doing regular primary voting and you count it all up, it's great that you just get the numbers. But if your system is, we take the numerical winners by precinct and, we do some sort of proportional representation instead of winner take all. Like, that's, I think, what people default to mentally is 116 to 87 to 73 equals 6 delegates for Bernie Sanders. He won. He sweeps the precinct and 6 delegates go on to the county for Bernie Sanders. But we love to include people in all the later rounds. So now we have a formula and it's a tie. You would think you would say, maybe you want to say, all right, well, maybe the system should be the winner clearly gets an advantage. Even if you only win by 1 vote, you should get a 1 delegate advantage over everybody else as a prize for having won. But I don't know whether that's probably just as distorting, right? So, like if somebody gets 100 votes and somebody gets 99, and one candidate gets 2 delegates and the other candidate gets 1 delegate, you cry about it and say, he's got 50% more delegates, but he only had 1% more votes or whatever it is. All right, well, that's a distortion too. And I guess in other states, I don't know how they do things necessarily. There's 50 states and all sorts of caucuses and primaries that are held in various districts and territories. So there's lots of ways to do things. I don't know offhand whether anybody does a system of voting like a primary, but then uses the results to allocate delegates, whether by precinct or by county, and then have county conventions. But if you actually track the results all the way along the line, as dumb as it seems to be changing numbers midstream in the Iowa caucuses, and you say, aha, I hate caucuses and we should go to primaries. States with primaries, the numbers change all the time. It's just that we don't care. The news reports don't really cover it. They report the results, but they're reported in a very different way. Splashy front page stuff day after a primary. Buttigieg wins. Yang wins South Carolina. That's the headline. But what is actually happening is that there's math, just like the Iowa caucus, going on behind the scenes. And though Yang wins the South Carolina primary, Buttigieg and Williamson and Delaney all get delegates. And the delegate number changes very often in some states as between the day after the primary voting results and the convention, because as it turns out, what you were really doing was voting for the numbers were being used to allocate delegates to county conventions, and then they were doing the same thing at county conventions, and then at the state convention they came up with a slightly different number, and the math distorted things again. And so, although you were the winner, it doesn't usually change who wins the most delegates, but it can change the numbers relative in between candidates, etc., and they can go up or down by 1 or 2 at each level. And so the numbers are never consistent as between voting day and the day the delegate counts are decided for the convention. So that doesn't get us out of it. Math always enters into it and screws things up at some level. But what you shouldn't come away with, certainly, despite every effort by the Trump campaign and Republicans to troll Democrats and to try to inflame any conspiracy-mindedness of the supporters of various candidates on the Democratic side, you should not come away with the impression that Republicans don't have these problems because there's a difference in the nature of the voters or the administration of the event as between Republicans and Democrats. I am reminded, thanks to Bill, who sent this on, of the tweet of Bill Weir at CNN. Does he say it Weir? W-E-I-R. Who sends on this information. In 2012, it took Republicans 16 days to decide that Rick Santorum had edged past Mitt Romney to win the Iowa caucus. This being sent, of course, in response to Donald Trump's trolling tweet, which, in case you're interested in the content of it, reads, "The Democratic caucus is an unmitigated disaster. Nothing works, just like they ran the country. Remember the $5 billion Obamacare website? That should have cost 2% of that, period." No question mark, that is. Remember, period. I guess he's just exhorting you to remember it. You should remember this, not do you remember it. The only person that can claim a very big victory in Iowa last night is Trump. Right. Okay, sure, of course. Fantastic answer. But that, Bill, just reminding everybody, well, in 2012, there was a problem involving some other people. I get it. It's true. There's a follow-up here that, I guess, is this a clip from the Washington Post from the 2012 Republican caucuses? It says all the same things. It also cast an unflattering light on the old-fashioned and convoluted system that the party uses to collect and count caucus votes. It should be like a fine Swiss watch, said Iowa State political science professor Stefan Schmidt. Are you sure you're a political science professor? I mean, you know that it's not going to be like a fine Swiss watch. It's really more like a sundial. He said the system used by Iowa Democrats was not significantly better. In fact, Iowa Republican leaders seemed to cast doubt on their own results, saying Thursday that it was hard to declare a winner without knowing what happened in those 8 precincts. I don't know which 8, but some important date. Matthew N. Strawn, the state party chairman, simply congratulated Santorum and Romney on a hard-fought effort during the closest contest in caucus history. So it happens, but I don't think it's any comfort to anybody today. Let's see. There are other comments that have come in the past 1 hour of ranting about what did and didn't happen last night. Kate Sherrill commenting, what was that Greg said yesterday? I don't know, I'll ask him. About getting the results in time for his return on Wednesday's show. Right, that's true. I also saw comments out there. People were saying it tongue-in-cheek, saying, oh, does Iowa still count as the first in the nation caucuses if they haven't finalized their results before Nevada holds its caucuses 19 days later? And I guess, given the example from the Republican side in 2012, that's a possibility. They went 16 days. You only have to go 3 more days. So just round up. It's 16 is now 19. Why not? We'll use caucus math for that. We should use caucus math for everything today in honor of the caucuses. Although I guess it would have been better to do yesterday. If we had known ahead of time how disastrous it was going to be, you could go around bargaining for items at the supermarket based on caucus math. Why don't you round that up, round that down? Try that at the gas station. See if it works for you. Let's see. Mike Musson saying, you aren't even through this caucus explanation, and I'm ready to throw all my support behind Armando for president. So this is working, and Armando will be pleased to know that. And his... you know what? We should run as a ticket. And our platform is cough, cough. And that's it. And you never really know what we're going to do. We're a blank slate, except we're all still, despite being blank, noisy and disgusting somehow. Anyway, I think that'll probably work. Okay. What else should we talk about? Let's see. Oh, yes. Speaking of the, I guess the conspiracy side of things, addressing that, I happened to see Judd Legum tweeting this morning that Judicial Watch, those bastards, yes, Judicial Watch continues to push maliciously false information. That is some kind of tongue twister for the morning. Judicial Watch maliciously false information. Shoo. They continue to push, and lots of sh. Judicial Watch. That's not really a sh, but you could see how could cause problems for you in the morning. Judicial Watch continues to push maliciously false information about Iowa voter registration. Wow. Even if you include inactive voters, which makes little sense, his report is still wrong. Whose report is it? I don't know. Well, let's see. He's including here the tweet of Tom Fitton. Oh, is he the Judicial Watch guy? Oh, yeah, he's the guy who loves to post, like, I'm a weightlifter photos of himself. Tom Fitton tweeting whenever he did this. I don't know. Why open it up? Breaking. Iowa Secretary of State confirms, quote, inactive voters kept on the voting rolls. Disinfo campaign ignores federal law that requires states clean up rolls. Judicial Watch data is correct. Best info, Iowa has 8 counties with more names on the rolls than eligible voters. And he attaches a Wall Street Journal report of some kind to this. Judd clears things up by saying voters become inactive when the Secretary of State believes they have moved. So these folks aren't going to show up in population surveys. If they do show up to vote, they are essentially treated the same as unregistered voters. That's what actually happens to them. There still aren't 8 counties in Iowa with more active and inactive registered voters than the population. If there were, it would not mean anything. Registration data is from this year, and the most recent population data is from 2 years ago. Don't take it from me, though. Listen to Iowa's Republican Secretary of State. He says the Judicial Watch report is BS, and it's all verifiable with public data. So that's pretty interesting, too, all by itself. Did I pocket this thing so that I can share it with you later? Yes, I did. So excellent. That's good news. I'll be able to share information about tamping down on that rumor. Let's see. All sorts of reports from all over the place about the way it's playing, and that's of some value all by itself. I guess if you're wondering what about the mainstream media and what do they have to say, maybe we'll sum that up in the next couple of minutes before our first hour break here. NBC News, you know, if Greg were here, he'd be going to NBC News and their, what do they call it? I can't remember. Their reporting system that he always goes to. Damn it, what's the name of that first, I don't remember. Why? It used to be on the page right here, and I was going to cite it. But never mind. Here's what they have to say about it. Iowa's reporting chaos helped 2 candidates, and it hurt 2 others. Ah, yes, there it is. First Read. I knew it was there somewhere. Remember them? First Read is your briefing from Meet the Press, and blah, 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 and the most important political stories and why they matter. So let's find out. Chuck Todd, who you can trust for everything, Mark Murray, and Ben Camisar get a byline on this, even though I have a feeling they didn't write any of it. What if you built it, but the results, that is, never actually came? They just had to do the Field of Dreams things. That's what happened last night in Iowa, where after a year of campaigning, $68 million spent on ads in the state, and all of the hype, we still don't have any results. 12 hours and counting after the caucus sites closed, which really is nothing compared to the 16 days. And although we're supposed to get results later today, the reporting and technological mess from the state party has resulted in a total wash. It's like Iowa never happened for the next 30 seconds, and then it will be like it happened. But anyway, it's like Iowa never happened, especially with tonight's State of the Union address, tomorrow's final impeachment trial vote, and the campaigning in New Hampshire already taking place, which was already the case anyway. The wash is, for now, a big break for Joe Biden, who seemed headed for a disappointing finish, according to the entrance polls and the viability process at many caucus sites. More on Biden below. I don't know if we're going to get to it before our break. It also allowed someone like Amy Klobuchar to declare success and move on to New Hampshire when it was unclear if she'd get a ticket out of Iowa when the night began. But it hurt Pete Buttigieg, who really seemed poised for a big night from some of those same entrance polls in the viability and realignment process. Imagine what last night could have looked like for him if there was neutral data to back up his big speech from Iowa. It might go down as one of the biggest what-if moments in politics. We'll see if they are correct about that later. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Maybe we'll continue with the First Read take on things. Again, just to give you some idea of what the vast majority of Americans who might be following the Iowa story might be reading in a morning like this. Interesting angle, you know. It sounds like in the end, like if, for instance, the final result is, well, Pete Buttigieg won, there should have been, absent the State of the Union address being given tonight, even though it's being given by a fake president, and the fact that he's under impeachment, and we're going to have a final vote on that tomorrow, and the fact that everybody hates waiting for results and takes the impact. There should have been a moment last night where Pete Buttigieg got on to the 11 o'clock news and the East Coast claiming victory, and everybody says, wow, story of the day is Pete Buttigieg, the kid from out of nowhere, Cinderella story, you know, the whole bit. Winning the Iowa caucuses, and what fabulous momentum he now brings forward into New Hampshire, where something may happen, or like so many Iowa caucus winners before him in the past, fades into oblivion, and he's a footnote in history. And later on in the second, second Amy Klobuchar administration, people are saying now that there's an open seat in the presidency, and we're looking for the successor to Klobuchar, and the lead candidate is her vice president, Sean Sebastian. Let's make Sean Sebastian, who did such a great job reporting from his precinct, vice president. Why would that happen? I don't know. And he's leading in Iowa, but everybody is cautioning us in probably September of the year prior to the actual elections. What would this be then? This is the 2020 election. 2024, she would win her second term. So the 2028 elections. So in September 2027, everybody says Sean Sebastian is shoo-in, leading in the polls in Iowa by a comfortable margin. And then somebody would say, hey, but remember that time that Pete Buttigieg actually won the Iowa caucuses in 2020, and everyone will be like, wow, Pete Buttigieg, that's a name I haven't heard in such a long time. Amazingly, he became the chairman of the board of Google and is the world's first multi-trillionaire now. I don't know what happened to him. Or he was, of course, dropped out of politics after that tragic curling accident, or I don't know, some sort of thing. That's the sort of thing we would remember years later. That the Iowa caucus ended up meaning nothing. But he could have had that big night. It also could mean, you ride that momentum into New Hampshire. Suddenly, Buttigieg, who nobody gave any chance to win the day he announced, and he was the big joke candidate, and no one could pronounce his name. Now he's president of the United States. That is kind of a what-if moment. Now, they continue over at First Read. For similar reasons, it hurt Bernie Sanders, whose path to the nomination relies on big moments out of Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and elsewhere. Everybody would depend on that. That said, it will be interesting to see Sanders' final numbers when they eventually come out. Is his army only young voters? I don't know, but this is also, you count on an event like this to change things. His army may be only young voters, and it may be the case in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and 2 or 3 other early states, or maybe everywhere. I don't know. But at some point, as other candidates drop out, or as other people who are saying, geez, I don't know, start to see the numbers, and he's either winning state after state or coming in second or whatever, and there's big headlines from people who are not young voters will say, they already are, lots of young voters who are already for Bernie, non-young voters who are already for Bernie, but more would say, you know what, I'll get on this bandwagon. That's why it's important, I guess. It helps people change their minds, even though it shouldn't, about what to do when their primary rolls around. Bandwagoning is a big deal. Anyway, more importantly, they say the entire situation was a disaster for the Democratic Party, as some candidates might say. Just check out President Trump's tweet from this morning. You already heard it. They hold it up as an example of, I don't know what, admirable politicking. I have no idea. The Iowa caucuses have 2 essential jobs in the nominating process since it goes first. 1, to winnow the field, and 2, to help determine the presidential frontrunners, and that's plural, frontrunners. They do say that. Last night's reporting disaster resulted in a failure on both fronts. For you. I mean, let's be honest. That's what we're talking about. You don't get to declare a winner. You don't get to use the leverage you have as the platform that is NBC's First Read to report the thing that you wanted to report, to be the arbiter of who is now the front runner, or who are now the front runners, now that you acknowledge that it can be plural. But the rest of us might not care, actually, whether or not you get to be big man on campus with all that. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, last night's reporting disaster resulted in a failure on both fronts, and now we head to New Hampshire with the same field of candidates and uncertainty at the top of the pack. New Hampshire, Democratic voters, weary eyes turn to you. No, they don't. We don't take our results from either or both of those states, and so who cares? That's the news as far as I can tell. So that's the way they're reporting it. There is, I guess, a little bit more of a local angle available too. This from Liz Lenz, who was one of the 2 reporters recommended by Sean Sebastian in his second thread. She's writing at The Gazette, which is presumably a local-ish paper in Iowa or Kansas City or whatever. Who cares about geography anymore? The president taught us that much. There are no winners in the Iowa caucuses, her headline reads. Just one big loser, the state of Iowa. And what a loser you are, state of Iowa. Shall we? Let's just run through it just a bit and see what she has to say about her own state or from on the ground or whatever. In the end, she says, we did this to ourselves. We played ourselves. The chaos and pandemonium out of the caucuses are a result of an imperfect system bent and molded until what happened was an actual procedural nightmare. Ooh, my favorite kind. There were so many candidates, and in a party gripped with the fear of another loss to that bloviating dictator who couldn't pick out the state of Kansas on a map, that meant indecision. This fear, paired with new rules and an already Rube Goldbergian process, and it was like serving turducken on a hamburger bun. Confusing and silly. You maybe just tell me what happened. Well, Liz, no offense. It was a good try. All right. This year, there were a lot of changes to the caucuses. Instead of one count, we were promised three. 3 counts. First, the first alignment count. Then, the second alignment. Then, the delegate totals. There was a brand new presidential preference card, which was a cross between a ranked choice ballot and a boring postcard from a level of political purgatory. Don't know about those things. I saw a picture of it. Didn't strike me as anything in particular, but okay. There was going to be a phone app about which we knew nothing, and nothing was told to us. And precinct captains whispered about it, but were told not to talk about it. But it never worked. Error messages and login problems. There was also new math to determine delegates. Is that new? Well, math sucks no matter whether it's old or new. We were promised these caucuses would be transparent. We were promised it would be accessible, or more than it was before. But what we got was something so convoluted, it made the perfect argument against itself. When anyone questioned the process or the nature of the caucuses, the party chairs shouted, "Retail politics," until they didn't have to listen anymore. On February 3rd, our caucuses became the game of Mousetrap. You remember that one? Are you old enough? A game that looks fun but never works, never catches the mice, and eventually your mom refuses to play, and then you just lose the pieces. Our moms are refusing to play. We are already losing the pieces. That works better if you've seen the Mousetrap commercial or ever played the game, but all right. The state of Iowa, in trying to put out the fire surrounding the caucuses, just burned the whole thing down. There are many questions and concerns that will overshadow the results. People walking out of the caucuses with these preference cards. Groups that should have been viable, now viable, shouldn't have been viable, now viable. To be clear, caucuses were always this confusing and messy. It's just now with the preference cards, there's hard proof. All right, so I guess the preference cards were the paper trail for verifying the counts of non-viable groups that don't count as far as delegates go, but count as far as reporting results go. I don't know. And on February 3rd, the longer the Iowa Democratic Party delayed the results, the more panicked the CNN and MSNBC pundits sounded. And that's part of the problem, too. I mean, you could just say, we'll get to you when we get to you. But in the artificial element of the race to be first to announce the results or to announce them the moment they become available, it just exacerbates the problem. I mean, I guess if you just have a patient electorate and say, the results will be ready when they're ready, at least the element of getting on the television and saying, what's going on? Panic at the disco. It's outrageous. The whole place is on fire. The app doesn't work. Everybody's angry. That element, take that away, the televised panic, and it's a complicated process. We'll get back to you when we get back to you. Don't worry about it. It's like still a year till the election. Honestly, you can take the time, right? So there is a very weird artificial element to all of this. All right, so the panicked reporters, what's going on in Iowa? They said over and over, where are the results? Where are the results? Like a group of 2-year-olds denied cake at a birthday party. Fox News declared this was Iowa's last caucus. I did see a lot of people say that was a possibility, though. Pundits wanted answers. They wanted clarity. Everyone wanted to get the hell out of Fort Dodge and on to New Hampshire, which also sucks, by the way. They were tired of the bales of straw, hog farms, and the talk of ethanol. They wanted to get out, but the caucus has never been that easy. Not in 2016, when inconsistencies in reporting led to campaign frustrations that spilled on into 2020. We know what those are. Not in 2012, when Rick Santorum was scrambling for caucus votes, tying with Mitt Romney. And the party itself was nervous, refusing to answer questions, refusing to tell anyone why the results were delayed. So the chorus of pundits openly wrung their hands on live TV. By the time any statement was made, it was too late. We were burning. Iowa had one chance to get it right, and we didn't. Ever since our first-in-the-nation status happened, more by accident of paperwork than any sort of God-given right, people have been asking, why these guys? Why them? And now, by accident of paperwork, making a confusing, cumbersome process that over 80% of most registered voters in Iowa don't even participate in, even more clunky. The question everyone has been asking was, why Iowa? And we couldn't give them an answer. On February 4th, the only thing we know is that there are no clear winners, only one big loser, and that's the state of Iowa. All right, I think I'll take that. And maybe we can even take that as the final word on the situation there in Iowa. Probably more time than it really needed, but it's what else are you going to do? We could sit here. I could have done an hour on what a tragedy that the impeachment thing isn't working, but we've been over that 100 times. We could preview the State of the Union, but that's just a matter of trying to guess how much of the speech will be yelling at people or gloating or lying, and it's really not fun to think about that either. There are a number of other things we could be covering, and in fact, I guess if we really just want to get back to an old-time subject, there were a number of splashy-ish shootings yesterday, not all of which rose to the level of mass shooting, but I had my eye on one in particular. There was a school shooting that didn't turn into a mass shooting because only 3 people were shot, including a child somehow. Not exactly certain how that came to be, but I happened to notice yesterday at Texas A&M there was a shooting, and the results is I didn't bother to pocket it as a story to report, but it occurred to me this morning that perhaps we would want to talk about it a little bit because it might be something of interest to you as a discussion point. I spent a lot of time on it yesterday. Let me grab one of the more recent reports on it here, if I can, from the Google front page. 4 hours ago was a report from MSN here. We'll grab that one. 2 women dead, 1 child hurt in shooting at college dorm. I'm talking about the Texas A&M University Commerce. I guess is that that's the campus in Commerce, Texas, that we're talking about. Multiple campuses for Texas A&M here, but 2 women and a child, or 2 women dead. Child is injured after a shooting at a residence hall at Texas A&M University Commerce on Monday, authorities said. The child, who's about 10 years old, was taken to a hospital in stable condition, according to the school's police department. The incident was reported at 10:17 a.m. local time at the Pride Rock Residence Hall, which houses freshmen, according to the school's website. There appears to be no other threats, police officials said Monday afternoon. They had about a 2-hour lockdown on the campus, I understand. The rest of it is pro forma stuff about hearts going out to everyone in the community. And it's important to send your heart out. That was from the president of the Commerce campus there, Mark Rudin. And classes were canceled for the day, so there's that too. Texas A&M's campus in Commerce, Texas is over 200 miles north of Texas A&M's main campus in College Station, in case you were wondering. Now, I said there was a bit of a question mark for me about it. Like, you can easily imagine a scenario, how a 10-year-old gets there. Clearly somebody visiting somebody else, and okay, so mostly freshmen in this dorm. It doesn't, not much else in the way of detail. I don't know whether anybody else reports things better or more thoroughly. I was sort of interested in it, but what really made the story interesting was, one, that it had happened on a college campus, and that gets everybody's eyebrows raised, and 2, it raised eyebrows for me because, here, in the CNN reporting, I guess it gets a little more thorough and gets to this second point. As of August 2016, they begin in this paragraph about halfway down, those who hold a current and valid concealed handgun license in Texas are allowed to carry a concealed handgun on certain parts of the campus. Handgun license holders are also allowed to store the weapon in a safe in their campus housing, according to the policy. So what was interesting in this to me was, of course, as soon as they reported this thing, the regulars on gun issues, the regular trolls, right-wing-ish trolls in this case, came out of the woodwork and spent the day trolling Twitter, saying, another shooting in a gun-free zone. See, I told you, these things only happen in a gun-free zone, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Of course, usually the line is that mass shootings only happen in gun-free zones, and this wasn't a mass shooting, but everybody gave it a pass because it happened on a school campus, I guess. But what was interesting was that they didn't bother with reporting, in most cases, that this was a campus carry place. Now, campus carry is something that gun rights enthusiasts, aka gun nuts, have been clamoring for some time and insisting that it would eliminate the problem, or at least minimize the problem of school shootings. And here, it very clearly just did not do that. And I just thought that was of some interest. I actually spent the afternoon with a screenshot of the NRA website open to their own reporting of the passage and adoption of Texas's campus carry law that enabled people to keep their guns with them on campus, in the dorms, in the classrooms. We're actually pretty much everywhere on Texas A&M campuses. And I probably ended up sending that to about 50 or 60 people who made their afternoon sport, running around saying, see, I told you, gun-free laws, gun-free zones invite this sort of thing. And when are the evil Democrats going to give us the chance to protect ourselves? Well, they had the chance to protect themselves. And look, they got shot anyway. No word on whether or not the people who were shot are among the very few residents of any of the dorms on any of the Texas A&M campuses that actually take advantage of the ability to keep a gun in their dorm. But it's there, and for all I know, the shooter kept the gun in his dorm and went next door and shot people with it. We don't really know. We may find out. We may never find out. People might forget about this shooting because only 3 people were shot. So who cares, right? It's day at the races for us in the USA. So I don't know. We'll see we'll keep an eye on that one. But that was interesting. And every once in a while, if you discuss the issue with somebody, you'll run into somebody for sure who gives you the gun-free zones thing. And might even bring it up in the context of Texas A&M because it's in the news and you'll be in the know. No, that's not actually true. They can bring their guns on campus. Some people then say, oh, but they can't bring them in the dorms. Yes, they can. And so there you go. Actually, the real upshot of this one before I turn to Joan. Thank you, Joan, waiting patiently. Sorry. I'll make this point quickly, is that basically in response to school shootings, the gun nuts everywhere clamored for campus carry and I guess promised miraculous results or whatever. And even if that was obviously not true and you're not going to prevent all shootings no matter what happens, here's the point. They scream for campus carry and you give it to them, and then they go out and they say, gun-free zone all day long anyway, and just troll Twitter with gun-free zone claims even when they get what they want out of it. So maybe just don't even bother giving them what they want. Just think about that. Next time you decide you'll cave to them in order to get rid of this complaint, the complaint comes through just the same. As with everything. It's a great analogy to almost everything. If you give Republicans what they say they want, they'll still say, you're wrong, you cheated, you lied, they'll give you're fake news, and just report the old talking point that worked for them beautifully last week, even though you gave them that concession. So don't concede anything to them. And with that, I think we have agreement and can bring. This is a great segue to Joan, because she'll tell you how to do stuff like that. Good morning, Joan.
And they'll shoot themselves in the foot,
right?
If
True,
they're professors in Idaho.
Yes. Oh, that was another part of the discussion. Oh, I ran into so many people that said, see, well, but they've had campus carry. Some of these states have gotten rid of the gun-free zones on campuses for years, and there's never been any accidents. Like, I have a list for you. And can't you don't you remember? There was the guy who shot himself in the foot. There was the teacher in Utah shot herself and it blew up the toilet. I mean, they were national stories. And then that particular person said, I meant there were no accidental deaths. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. So
the guy in Idaho, it was in the first week of campus carry, if I remember correctly.
I believe so. And that happened to a lot of places. There was a number of accidents, and it was early, and that's when the accidents happen, when people are getting used to the new policies. And Texas A&M has had dorm shootings since, including people, goofing around with the guns that they brought legally under the new policy. And I think the Texas A&M Commerce, I think this is actually their second shooting incident in about 4 months. I don't know if it has anything to do with the gun policy. I don't know what it's like in Commerce, Texas. Maybe they're always shooting one another. But it's certainly no magic cure. And I don't think even advocates for the policy really honestly would say that, but or ever said that it was any kind of magic cure. But you can also just take with you that it never shuts them up. And even when you show them the campus carry policy, they say, yeah, but it does say there are some places on campus that you're not allowed to bring it. There's a child care center on campus. And they say no guns in a child care center. And somehow that's supposed to prove the point. And of course you say, well, you said mass shootings only happen in gun-free zones. There's an actual gun-free zone in the middle of this non-gun-free zone, and they shot people at the non-gun-free part of it. You're a libtard. That was usually the answer. And then they left and blocked me.
Yeah.
So anyway, have you ever had caucuses in Idaho or anywhere that you lived, Joan?
We'll have to talk about the Idaho caucus at length.
Oh, okay. Well, we can do that after the break, or have a whole show.
We're not doing them this year. We're back to primaries.
Yeah,
it's a very, very good thing.
Yes.
But yeah, we can talk about caucuses.
I've
done them in Washington State, which was in 2008.
Yeah.
And it was chaotic.
Yeah.
Interesting, but chaotic. Really, really not a good place for introverts.
No.
Really not a good place for people who like to vote privately.
Right.
It's not a good place for people who are disabled, for people who have a really important place to be elsewhere, who have children that need to be watched, who have family members who need to be cared for. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hate caucuses.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a bad spot. I think I finally hit on the summary of it that I liked is that all the fun of waiting in line for hours to vote, but with a comments section. So you get pestered. Can you go to a caucus in headphones or AirPods or something and just point and say, I can't hear you? I mean, I guess it's possible, right?
You can be as inactive as you want to be, just be the body there sitting with your candidate if you want to.
Yeah.
But you're going to be harassed by people if your candidate is not viable and they want you to change. At that point, you can leave, but that screws up numbers, which we saw.
Yeah, I got the very interesting report from one particular precinct, which was good to go through the process. It was tweeted out from one of the Iowa precincts of exactly how it works and just showing the absurdity of the math calculations that you have to go through. And that, I guess Bernie Sanders people would be justifiably miffed to say, he ran away with it in this precinct, but he ended up with the same number of delegates as everybody else.
Yeah. Well, and there was one I saw tweeted where after the first count, the young people were not viable. There were 7 of them. Mm-hmm. They just left. Yeah. How do you reconcile the numbers between the first and second counts when people leave?
Yeah,
you can't.
You stick with the first number of. Is that what you have to do? I don't know. I mean, I guess. Well,
when you have to recalculate for viability. I just doesn't. Yeah. None of it makes any sense. And we can talk about Idaho on the flip side. How much time do we have before the flip side?
We're going to hear our music in about 20 seconds, and then we'll have 30 seconds of music.
Okay.
How about that? And then we'll
have
a half hour afterwards. So, well, we can talk about plenty of that stuff. All right. So it really was relatively disastrous, even for a caucus, of course, just because, although it does seem to me that a lot of the disaster part of it seems to have been artificial, created by the fact that the news cameras were there and wanted answers, and there weren't any, and so that was
I
a
think
disaster.
that was the least of it.
Yeah?
Honestly.
Okay. All right.
But
Well, I guess no surprise that the news
argue
media...
about that later.
Yeah, well, no surprise that the news media thought that was the most part of it, and everybody else who's actually experienced these things might have a different perspective. So we'll get that in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We've been checking in on things and other issue areas we can look into, but really most of the eyes still on the caucus thing. The State of the Union, of course, happening tonight, and how do you summarize that other than saying, well, okay, so he'll lie and berate Democrats, and I guess it's just to watch tonight for how venomous can you make a State of the Union speech even as Donald Trump and quote-unquote get away with it. And, of course, I guess if you can get away with what he got away with in the impeachment trial, I guess there's no limit.
Okay, but we're not done talking about caucuses.
Right. Let's go back. I'm just saying, here, by way of excusing our discussion of the State of the Union, let's talk about something that matters, I guess, the caucuses. Yeah, and you have some great stories in addition to berating Iowa.
I just tweeted a picture from 2016
okay, I'll
of
send this around too if you're listening
Ada
live.
County, Idaho's caucus, which is where I live, is Boise.
Mm-hmm.
And the something like 12,000 people who showed up. So, yeah, no, you can't make that work. And why they wanted to do this, I don't know. I think they wanted to do it because the party had, the Idaho Democratic Party had been sort of co-opted by a certain candidate's crew primarily, and what they wanted was more of a Guinness Book of World Records kind of caucus than an actual thing that would work.
This is in like a basketball.
It's in a stadium. Yeah, it's in a basketball
arena.
stadium.
Okay.
So there were something like 12,000 people.
And yeah, how
so
do you count that?
Took, because they had to count people, give them their cards, register them, it took something like 3 hours for a lot of people to stand in line just to get into the room.
Okay.
Then they had to figure out where they sat in the room. Then they had to try to count these massive groups of people sitting in their clusters representing candidates. Then they had to try, and imagine trying to persuade somebody in this room that they should switch to your candidate. Imagine trying to find the people who are unaffiliated. Imagine. Yeah. It was chaos. It was awful.
Yeah.
And I didn't go. I mean, this is secondhand because I didn't go because I couldn't leave my job for 8 hours to go stand in line to get into the stadium and then spend however many hours milling around trying to figure out what in the hell was going on.
Wow.
So I didn't go.
Yeah.
My mother didn't go. My mother has arthritis in both knees and she can't do that. Yeah. She can't stand for hours on end. people who had to work, people who had to take care of their kids. It was a mess. So we're doing a primary this year.
Okay.
Yay.
Well, I mean, that's the only thing that makes any sense in a situation like this. This is clearly unusual, but they really couldn't have possibly have thought this through. But I guess sometimes when these caucuses are called, and it is a matter of putting on a show of some kind, as you mentioned here, like a Guinness Book of World Records style caucus. But even in the Iowa caucuses, like you pointed out during the break, I thought an important point is if you're relying on the news media for word of what happened there, and a lot of us are because we're not in Iowa. Twitter opens things up a little bit, all sorts of electronic communications. You can get some on-the-ground reporting, but those TV cameras, of course, I imagine they seek out larger, more boisterous, maybe even more confrontational precincts to film at. And I guess if you send crews to 5 different places, you don't pick the one where everybody says, all right, so Pete Buttigieg won very clearly. Let's go home.
Yeah.
You pick the ones where
there were some at
fights
smaller
or-
caucuses. There were some where there were 40 people. But
Yeah, B-roll.
they're not representative of what happened last night because they were only at a handful of them. There were hundreds of caucuses last night, and there were only a handful of folks, of camera crews at various places. So you can't really rely on them, but we ended up relying far too much on them.
Yeah.
Because nothing was coming out of Iowa. And, we're relying on campaign spokespeople who are tweeting out, well, Buttigieg did this, Sanders did this. But we can't rely on them because they're the campaigns. They're going to spin it their way. So,
And I imagine
in
nobody...
some ways, it was very good that they made it as complicated as they did in showing all 3 counts. But that totally screwed it up. Because all 3 counts are going to be inconsistent.
Yeah.
Because, A, it's people counting, volunteers roaming around counting people. You can miscount easily. It's people switching sides at the last minute. It's people deciding that their candidate's not viable, so they're just going to leave. Which, when you try to compare the first round with the second round, it doesn't work because people have gone. There's not a way to do this that makes sense, that's organized.
Right.
Nevada has been somewhat better, but it's not going to be great either. So if there's a winner out of Iowa last night, it's all of us who hate caucuses, because chances are very good that this is not going to happen again.
Yeah, that's true. Although...
It's going to be such a massive screw up that we can really argue next time around in 4 years that that Iowa doesn't get to go first and that it doesn't get to have a caucus.
Yeah.
I hope. I really, really hope, because this is just ridiculous.
Well, maybe they'll be relieved to be out of the spotlight if this goes really badly. Although,
and it ends up. It puts more pressure on New Hampshire. It puts more pressure on all of the candidates to do well in New Hampshire.
Yes, true. I don't know if they love that.
Nobody came out of this looking good.
No.
Nobody.
No. Even the people who are giving the best explanations of what actually happened and why it works the way it works. It's like, all right, well, I guess they come out looking like they're not liars, and it's helpful that they shared all their information, but they're stuck in a system, and they're pointing fingers at the system a lot. At the same time, they're reporting what's going on, but I don't know. They don't look bad necessarily, but still, you're the one that had to report that it was a tie when it wasn't a tie. So, okay. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that there's any conspiracy theory that makes any sense. Nobody rigged this for anybody else's benefit. No, Robbie Mook didn't have anything to do with the app that broke.
I don't know.
It just brand new apps that nobody has tested before and that they knew was buggy early on in the day. That's human error. And I guess the takeaway is there's no system more likely to fall to human error than a caucus.
I guess,
Say you add in, and you have with Twitter, you add in the layer of disinformation, misinformation.
Yes, that's a problem.
It's bad.
Yeah. Although as I'm mulling it over, I see this. There's a tweet here that I just grabbed and put aside. Who is this? I guess I ought to figure out who's saying this before I necessarily read it out. A staff writer for National Review, to give you some idea. But I guess a relatively nonpartisan commentary. Alexandra DeSanctis saying in one of these formatted tweets, absolutely no one, : and here comes the quote. The guy who invented caucuses says, you know what? Paper ballots are super lame. Why don't we all head on down to the local middle school and shuffle around the gymnasium for a while till we sort this one out? Okay,
yeah.
Big joke and all. But I'm wondering if there's any caucus, Iowa caucus traditionalists defending this thing. And I guess what if you tweeted around pictures of, Broward and Palm Beach County, Florida, 2000 vote counters looking at hanging chads and trying to decide whether a dimpled chad is a vote or not. And I guess at that level you can say, you know what won't go wrong? We'll actually take all the voters and lock them in a room and say, stand over there if you're for this one and stand over there for that one, and I'll count them. You can't mess that up. And it's like, well, we just did that last night. Doesn't work either. There's just no way to count
hold my
people.
Beer.
Right. So I guess as between two systems that are both somehow, despite all the designs, liable to error, I guess you err on the side of the one more people can be involved in, and it takes people a couple minutes if things go well, or even if it takes a couple of hours, at least the ballot's private and no one's yelling at you. So I don't know. I don't know that there's a great way of doing it, but each time it's designed ahead of time, you look at it and you say, maybe this is annoying, but it's foolproof, right? If there are 5 people here and 4 people there, I know who the winner is. Well, no, you don't. Convert that into delegates.
Which works in a place, in a lot of very, very, very rural precincts where there are only 9 people.
Right.
Yeah, it works. And they already know each other, and they already know who everybody's going to vote for because they know each other.
Yeah, and if one candidate gets one delegate and the other gets the other, well, there was 5 and there was 4. That seems about fair. So they both get 1 delegate. That's pretty close. Great. Let's all go home. As soon as you get into results that don't appear to make a whole lot of sense on the surface, you look at the size of the groups. This one precinct that we followed the report on had 116 people standing up in Bernie Sanders' corner and 73 people in the Buttigieg corner and 87 people in the Warren corner, and the delegate count is 2 to 2 to 2 because of the math.
Yeah.
And that's when people start to get upset about it, I guess, and maybe rightfully so. Although, I guess at this point, if you've been through 2 caucuses for Bernie Sanders, and it's just, I don't know, you're not satisfied with the outcome of either one of those 2, then, at the very least, you have to say, well, maybe the caucus system just doesn't work very well for anybody. Although last time around, I think they were very enthusiastic about the caucuses because they were doing very well there. This time, they have, delegates being pulled off by other people who just barely make viability or just barely cross the threshold to grab onto another delegate. And now the caucus system actually kind of sucks. And it's no good for my candidate.
Yes. So. And it's good to remember that it's not just the Democratic caucus is screwed up. It took like 2 weeks or something for them to figure out the Republicans in 2012, and they ended up going with Santorum.
Yes,
so
which is a dumb result even if you did it immediately. But,
right, if you end up with Santorum as your winner.
Yeah, he's got something wrong with your system right off the bat. 16 days, as I understand, was the report I saw earlier today. So that's a long ways.
It's a long ways.
Man. All right. So you've been through, you said you did caucuses in Washington at one point too. Is that right?
Yeah.
So Washington and Idaho both. And both are now.
And I've
forget
observed in Colorado,
Okay.
which was kind of fun in 2008. It's if you have the personality for it, it is kind of fun to get together with a bunch of people and argue over politics.
Yeah, there's a very
if you have the right personality
rural
for it,
appeal to
and
it.
if it's not determining anything important.
True. And if you can live with the results and you know what you're getting into is also helpful. I mean, as a concept, the idea of old time, hey, I'm flexible on these things. Let's see what my neighbors feel like doing, and let's present the united front. Could be great. And then I think the reality intrudes where you're just like, no, thank you. I really actually don't want to talk about it. I actually for a viable candidate, and I'm very happy. I don't want to change.
And get out of my face.
Right. And they just keep going and going. And, well, what if you're not viable? Well, then I'm going home. I wasn't gonna, but you're very annoying.
Yeah.
And so I may leave.
It's in 19th century America, what a nice thing to do.
Right.
In 21st century America, what the hell are you thinking?
Right. In 19th century America, it was also probably harder to leave. Well, I'm going home if my candidate doesn't want. Really? On a horse in the snow?
You may as well
right.
stay here where it's
right.
warm.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm getting in my Tesla and I'm out of here. Okay. That's very nice. It's already started. I started it from in here. It's warm. So, that'll make a difference too. Bad news all around. But, worse that it can be exploited by trolls to come up with the storyline that, the worst possible thing, that it's actually being manipulated again and stolen from this one or that one.
And trolls are out in full force.
Yeah.
And not just trolls, but the usual suspect, horrible people on Twitter.
I've seen a lot of weird things.
Who, I don't know if they're actually trolls or if they're just misguided people anyway. It's a mess. It's a mess.
It seems bad.
And to make it all even better, tonight we get Donald Trump on our televisions everywhere. He will be inescapable because it's the State of the Union address, which should not be happening. But
right.
Nancy Pelosi is, a straight up Speaker of the House and says, we always do this, so we have to do this, even if he's impeached and even if he's crazy and even if the world could be ending tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean...
This is shaping up to be the absolute worst week of 2020. It's only February.
Yeah, and I imagine there's additionally... is it also... It's bad for all of us. Is it particularly bad for the front page newsroom, just trying to figure out how to allocate resources?
It is, because yesterday we had closing arguments in Iowa. Today we have the State of the Union and ongoing arguments in impeachment. Tomorrow we have the vote, the impeachment vote. Right. We have a day off on Thursday, and then on Friday we have the next Democratic debate.
Okay, so it's really just like live threads all week.
We've had to give up on trying to live blog because because Mark's fingers can't do that.
Right. I guess
for
there's
a full
limits
week.
to that.
And neither can mine.
Yeah. Also, at some point, clearly with for the impeachment coverage, it's like, well, all right. I think we all know what the substance of the argument is.
Just watch
at this point.
this speech by Adam Schiff and weep that it makes no difference with Republican senators.
Yes. I know all of you will never believe it, but Lisa Murkowski is not going to vote to convict Donald Trump. The breaking news, which was even less interesting than her vote on, the suspense on her vote over witnesses. The witnesses vote could have counted for something. This was never going to count for anything. But this is the one she chose to make a speech about.
Yeah.
So she's a Republican, and that means just what you thought it was going to mean at the beginning of this process. But 3 weeks into it, it's confirmed. So there you have it.
There's only there really is only one suspenseful thing, and it's not suspenseful because you need 67 votes to convict, and there are not going to be 67 votes. So no matter what Mitt Romney does, it's not going to really make a huge amount of difference.
Mm-hmm. But
so,
yeah, if he decides to go out on a limb, now there are rumors. I understand that Trump has been reported that he's saying, "Oh, I'm making an enemies list. I'm going to make a post-impeachment enemies list, and I'm obviously going to put all the Democrats on it, and probably any Republican who either votes or says anything nasty about their vote to acquit me." Like that I actually did something wrong, but that doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. You probably go on the list too. But that's, as with everything with Trump, it's unconfirmed. Who
of
who
course,
knows?
Trump has an enemies list.
Right. I mean, it's unconfirmed, but he's Donald Trump. So,
yeah.
What if it's not confirmed? What if he didn't say it? He's still going to do it.
Of course he has an enemies list, and he's got his own Roy Cohn, who's probably willing to open up investigations to at least a third of them.
Yes. It may be something that he's perfectly happy to announce out loud or show the list to people like he does when he signs legislation. Or he may keep it secret. I don't know whether he cares one way or the other. If he's emboldened by the acquittal, maybe he does share the list. I don't see why he wouldn't, but maybe he likes to sneak up on people. But yeah, of course he's got an enemies list. It's ridiculous to think that he wouldn't have one. I know there were a couple people trying to caution me that was just a rumor, but I mean, what's the difference between rumor and reality for Donald Trump? And also, who cares? What if it's fake news?
Bill Barr is kind of capable of doing anything on behalf of Trump. Yeah, I don't see any reason at all to doubt that story.
So I won't. And we know who will be on it. And it's just a question of what he does with it and how active is he with it. And does it fall to... It'll take a while to manifest itself.
But by the way, don't say that if you're a Democratic House manager on the Senate floor to Senate Republicans, because they will be deeply, deeply offended.
Right. They might vote to acquit him.
Just on the basis of that.
That's it. I was going to be the 67th vote, but forget it now. Oh, she's not going to do... All right, me neither. All right, it's back down to 53-47. All right. So don't offend anybody by saying that. I did see an interesting comment on the John Bolton thing is becoming slightly more interesting just in the sense of like, what was his game? If he's not going to have a press conference or release the book faster or I don't know what, but here Jeet on Twitter, Jeet here, pointing out for everybody, wait, John Bolton started a war which had no clear path to victory or exit strategy and will end in disaster? How is this possible? That he would bring out the book and just tease that something was extraordinarily important to the country, but never mind, I won't tell you until it's too late. And oh my gosh, this is backfiring on me and I don't have any way of fixing it. And now, I guess it's part of the report that Trump has an enemies list. I guess the real unconfirmed part was that they were saying that Trump might prevail on Barr to prosecute Bolton for something, come up with something, prosecute him. I guess that's the part that people were most concerned about.
For releasing classified information, which we can't do yet because, of course, the White House is still reviewing the book, supposedly.
Which, of course, means it hasn't been released.
And the national security agencies and everybody else is supposedly going through the book to make sure there's nothing classified in it. And so it'll be hard for them to turn around and say there's classified stuff in this book that we haven't allowed to be released and Bolton needs to be prosecuted for it because it's in there, but nobody's ready yet to,
But the point is that I'm angry about it, and why don't we Trump could certainly go out and say, well, I want to criminalize this thing starting now. And but then you wouldn't be able to prosecute him because ex post facto, I never heard of that. And what is that anyway? And Slatin doesn't make any sense. I don't want any ex post facto. I said no ex post facto or quid pro quo or anything. So I don't know. I'm not certain what that results in, but I don't know. And when does this book come out? We don't even know because
we don't know because the White House is holding it.
Okay, so they'll just hold
it's
it
supposed
forever.
to be mid-March, but if the White House doesn't release it, they can go ahead and publish, but they're putting themselves in some legal jeopardy if they do so without clearance. So
okay, well, so I would just
I
guess
keep
that they
seeing
never
the
publish
mid-March
it.
publication date, but that is not certain. So we don't know. We don't know.
Okay, so like the Iowa caucuses, we don't know. We don't know if the president is violating the law. We don't. I mean, I guess they can just say, we classified the whole book. You never get to publish. And there's a court fight, and maybe we find out that the classification was bogus. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't get to look at that. I don't know. It's. I guess I would put nothing past Trump. But so far, I guess all the best information has mostly come from FOIA fights from third parties anyway. They seem to have a lot more luck in loosening up the information than Congress has had, although that's something to speculate on too. Say post-impeachment, post-State of the Union, does the House say, well, we tried it once, for all you people clamoring for it, didn't work, that's that, let's go to November? Or do they say, we've been frustrated? I mean, it'd be difficult if Adam Schiff were to press forward and to say there really needs to be more activity. Hard to knock the support out from beneath Adam Schiff now. But I guess it's doable. Hard, though, to imagine Schiff saying, I'm going to fight the speaker and say we got to impeach again and watch. And hard to imagine her losing on that. But I don't know that she's a yes. I don't know that she's a no.
I think that they go ahead. If nothing else, they go ahead with hearings, and they go ahead with releasing more information, bringing more stuff to light, and making Republicans in the Senate look worse and worse and worse every week as we head into the election.
Yeah.
I don't know what other endgame we could possibly have at this point.
Yeah. And I imagine, just guessing at Pelosi's demeanor, she just said, well, we'll just pile up the information. Well, what if it leads inexorably to the conclusion that you should be impeaching him on something else? Well,
we've been there already.
Yeah.
We have.
Well, that won't work either. And it's hard to argue with her. I mean, it wouldn't. And I guess we should take the win we got in terms of, I guess, convincing House Democrats at long last that we don't have the votes is not a viable excuse anymore. But now, as between now and November, it will be a viable excuse, I suppose. But at least you showed your cards. So I guess there's that. All right. So
there's one thing I want to make sure that we get in before the day ends as we prepare to listen to the State of the Union address. Mm-hmm. And those are the words of Hogan Gidley, White House spokesman. Yes. Did you hear this?
No, I just laugh at his name.
About tonight's speech and Trump's preparation for it. Quote, the president is a best-selling author and deeply gifted orator who packs arenas and has a meticulous and carefully honed method for writing his speeches.
Oh, my God.
Whether it be at a rally, a manufacturing plant opening, or the State of the Union, what the American people hear is 100% President Trump's own words.
Well, at least we can blame it on him.
Is true.
Yes, that's true. No one else utters those words, or would ever dare. But I think we all. I don't know what to say to that. I mean, that's just so blatantly wrong.
That's what to expect going into tonight.
Okay, I guess I'll dig out my favorite picture of him writing.
Orator delivering carefully honed words.
Okay, they're so honed. They were strongly honed. But I I can't wait to pull it. I love looking at the picture of him writing the first one at Mar-a-Lago with that vapid look. He looks like a wax statue. I love that one.
Oh, darn, I wish I'd remembered that. Use that picture.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I'll probably find it and tweet it around again. It should be grabbed and used again. There should be plenty of time to do it. Hogan Gidley. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
he should, I don't know. He sounds like a pro golfer, that name. But anyway, that's baloney, and I can't believe that he actually said it and will get paycheck and everything. But, whew. Okay, that's extraordinary. I'm glad you dug that one up.
Tomorrow can talk about how carefully honed those words.
Yeah, we will. Thank you. Thank you for honing them in the last minute here. I'm glad you brought that up. I would otherwise have missed it. Take care, Joan. Good luck surviving tonight. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, time to wrap it up and hand it over to Justice Butman for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. You can imagine what he might be focusing on domestically, even though I guarantee you he's got you some surprises in store as well. How about internationally? News from the UK post-Brexit. Let's find out what's going on immediately there. Coming up next.